Welcome to the Three Championship Drive podcast on YouTube, hosted by me, Lance Caporossi. Follow me on X at Lance Caporossi, the same way you see it spelled on the screen. Do us a favor, hit the subscribe button, like the video, but more importantly, tell a Pistons fan. So I had no idea what we were going to talk about on this podcast until all the news broke earlier today. I was driving into work and the news came across the screen that the Detroit Pistons had signed Malik Beasley. And I thought, okay, this is it. We're signing Malik Beasley. We're gonna be part of one of these trades. Like that's what I was thinking all throughout the day. So let's talk about the Pistons signing Malik Beasley. So they signed him to a 1-year deal worth 6 million plus. I personally love the pickup. And this feels like an absolute steal for a guy that does what he does at the level he does it at. And that is shooting the three. So Malik Beasley shot 41.3% from three on 6.9 attempts per game. He shot 42.4% on catch and shoot threes on 5.3 attempts per game. From the left corner, he made 46.8% of his threes on 94 attempts. From the right corner, he made 46.6% of his threes on 131 attempts. And from above the break, he made 37.5 of his threes on 317 attempts. So this is a guy, again, knows his role and does it at a very high level. Now, the ugly with Malik Beasley is he doesn't get to the free throw line, doesn't play defense, and doesn't move the ball very well. This guy does one thing, and it's shooting. That's the only thing this guy brings to the team. And I'm going to be honest with you, for $6 million, I think it's a steal, and I absolutely love this signing for the Detroit Pistons. But what are your thoughts on Malik Beasley, Zach?
I love it. It's a bench piece that we have been searching for a long period of time that can actually put the ball in the basket. He's not. I don't think he's going to be someone that plays a lot of minutes for us. I don't think he's really going to touch a starter role. But because I think in Milwaukee, he played 79 games last year with Milwaukee, started 77 of them. He played almost 30 minutes a game. I don't think we use him. I don't think we have that high of a usage for him. But I think, like you said, he knows his role, and I think he knows what he's getting into when he comes to Detroit. And I mean, maybe he'll be playing for a bigger contract because I mean, it's not a huge contract coming for 1 year coming to Detroit. But I think this is a good signing. I think it's a show of what Trajan Langdon's trying to do because it's pretty clear cut of what we brought in with Tim Hardaway, Malik Beasley, and re-signing Fontecchio, which we're going to talk about too. Is we're focusing on shooters. We're getting pieces that can put the ball in the basket that shoot well from three. So I'm okay with this. And yeah, his defense is pretty poor, but I think if he's not going to be a starting guy, like if he's not going to be in that rotation, I think he'll be on the floor with guys that will play defense. So it's like someone that we can kind of hide on defense, and I think we can kind of manipulate in a good way because I think he comes off the bench with maybe even Ron Holland and Jaden Ivey, and I think you can kind of hide him within those guys when whoever's on the floor.
So I'm actually going to disagree with you. I think he starts for the Detroit Pistons.
Really?
Yeah, dude, I 100% think he starts, and that's the next topic. I think he
Yeah.
starts for the Detroit Pistons. We're going to talk about our starters later on down the line. Look, dude, your opinion's valid. Like, if you think he comes off the bench, you think he comes off the bench. I think he starts because when the team is getting going, when the game is just getting going, Cade Cunningham and Malik Beasley just makes the most sense to me. I'd rather see the energy guys like Jaden Ivey come off the bench instead of Malik Beasley. I'd rather things have them get going. When the defense is kind of sleeping and just waking up, that's when Cade's going to operate. And he's going to find, and that's when he's going to find Malik Beasley for catch and shoot threes. That's what I want to see. So now that we know that you don't think he's going to start for the Detroit Pistons, I'm wondering, what do you think this means for Jaden Ivey? Because in my opinion, it means Jaden Ivey goes to the bench and runs the second unit. I think he'll split time at the two with Cade Cunningham at the one. I think we'll see some minutes of Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham on the floor together, but I don't think we'll see a ton of minutes of them together. But I don't think that will matter because we'll still see enough of the two of them together to kind of get a clear picture of what their future looks like. but I definitely think the signing of Malik Beasley more than Tim Hardaway Jr. means that Jaden Ivey will be coming off the bench for the Detroit Pistons this upcoming season. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, what I'm liking about this is I know that Jaden Ivey, watching a lot of Big Ten basketball when he was at Purdue, that the dude's a freaking competitor. And if you're bringing in Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway Jr., signing all these guys in a position that's supposed to be his, if he really wants to earn that position, this is the year that he needs to come out from a shell and perform the way that he needs to, like what we've been asking for him to do. So I think he's finally going to get put in a good role where maybe even if he is leading the second unit, what's wrong with that? Because even if he's leading the second unit and say it's the first quarter or 5 minutes and he comes in and he's playing well, you're not telling me with JB Bickerstaff, if he's playing well, he's going to stay in with these starters. Like, I think we're in a better situation that Monty's gone and JB's in place. Granted, I'm not super excited about the hire, but I am happy that we have a coach now. Yeah, I know that I complained about not hiring coaches that are fired from other organizations. I get it. I am still a little irritated about it, but I am happy that we have a guy that coached well with young players. And I think that if Ivy gets put in a good setting, I think we can finally see him grow. So I don't think Ivy should be worried any means about minutes. I think if he's going to go and be the number one, because he'd probably end up running point guard on second unit.
Yeah,
Wherever he comes in and he runs the one, he really needs to prove to us why he deserves to be on that starting lineup. But there's nothing wrong with being a sixth man. You're still going to get heavy minutes. You're still going to get the opportunity to play, and you're going to lead the other team the second unit that's full of young guys. So I don't see what's wrong with that. But I think Trajan's, with who he's bringing into the system, is showing like, hey, Jaden, we believe in you, but we need to see it. And hopefully we see it this year, or maybe he could end up getting dealt to another team. So far, he's keeping all the young guys, man. So I don't see him moving on with these guys. I think he has a little bit of faith with the young roster that we have. So I like where we're at. I think we'll talk about our starters. You'll probably disagree with mine a lot, but I love Ivy coming off the bench.
No, and I do too. And I think that's the absolute perfect role for him. I liked that role for him last year when Monty Williams was the head coach, because even though I thought Cade and Jaden Ivey would be like this thunder and lightning in the backcourt, I thought Jaden Ivey, dude, if he has the ball in his hands, he can make some plays. He can make some, he can play make, he can get to the rim, he can do a little bit of scoring. I still like that role as a six man. And also with Tim Hardaway Jr., with Malik Beasley, with Jaden Ivey, all potentially getting minutes at that two spot with Cade playing the one, it gives you a lot of different combinations that you can go into with the fourth quarter. You have more hands that you can, ride into the fourth quarter. It depends on who's feeling it, whether it's Ivy, Tim Hardaway, or, Malik Beasley. Who's ever feeling it, you can play them in the fourth quarter. And I like that type of flexibility that these three guys bring in that backcourt spot next to Cade Cunningham. And I agree with you too. I like these signings because Tobias Harris, Simone Fontecchio, Malik Beasley, all 1 and 2 year deals. I think it's setting Trajan Langdon up to really evaluate the young players and potentially sign them to larger deals, without being too strapped for, cash down the line. So I really like the deals. I love it. I like that this gives JB Bickerstaff flexibility with his lineups. I like that we're potentially going to see Jaden Ivey off the bench with some space in Malik Beasley and Tim Hardaway Jr. But I also like that Trajan Langdon is sticking to what he said in the press conference and providing more shooting and making Cade's life easier. I love that he's sticking to his guns with all of that. It makes me feel really good.
Yeah, he's not shying away to anything he wants. He's building a culture, which bringing in JB Bickerstaff is huge because from what everyone has said about JB Bickerstaff, his communication is top notch. And Monty Williams, I think I talked more to a stuffed animal than I talked to Monty Williams because he just had no idea what the hell was going on. So I think we're learning a lot. We're trying as fans, and even though a lot of it's enclosed off and we don't get a lot of information to be able to reach out with it, but I think Trajan's really proving to us that he has a plan. There is one in place. And when you are a 14-win team, it doesn't matter what the plan is. At least it's something that's there.
Yeah.
So we're moving on with something. But with the signings, it's we have a lot of pieces. Yeah, they're young. Yeah, maybe a lot of them haven't really proven themselves in the league, but a lot of these guys are getting the opportunity to actually do that now.
Yep, they really are. And yeah, I just love everything. Yeah, again, 14-win team. You don't really have a plan in place. Well, you did it with Troy Weaver. Now you do with Trajan, and he's sticking to it. Absolutely love it. So the Detroit Pistons have agreed to a 2-year deal worth $16 million with forward Simone Fontecchio. Simone Fontecchio was brought in by Troy Weaver at last year's trade deadline. In 16 games, 9 starts for the Detroit Pistons, Simone Fontecchio averaged 15.4 points per game, 4.4 rebounds, 1.8 assists, but more importantly, shot 42.6% from 3 on 6.8 attempts per game, 6.3 attempts per game. Simone Fontecchio was a guy I had been targeting since before the trade deadline. This was a guy I really wanted them to go after in the offseason, but my wish came early at the trade deadline. He's another guy that gives JB Bickerstaff some lineup flexibility with Simone, Tobias Harris, Tim Hardaway Jr., Malik Beasley. You have enough shooting where you can get creative with Asar Thompson, and we may even see Asar handle the ball and do a little bit of playmaking this season. But what are your quick thoughts on Simone Fontecchio re-signing with the Detroit Pistons?
So the way that I look at this is with us not taking Dalton Connect at 5, I think that once that was passed by and we took more of a flexible two-way player in Ron Holland, that made me very like I was 100% sure that Fontecchio was going to stay in Detroit because I think Fontecchio and Dalton Connect were very similar players, and I think if Fontecchio, like if we had opportunity to trade or get rid of him or just not take on a contract for him, I think that's when they would have maybe picked up more of a shooter like a Dalton Connect because I think they play kind of similar. Yes, one's been in the league longer, and yes, one's a rookie. I get it. But the way that I look at both of those players, they both do the same thing pretty well when it comes to shooting the ball. So I'm happy with the sign. 2-year, not a huge contract. We can see how he works with this team. I think you were talking about before podcasts about the contract ends when he's 30 years old. So there's a little bit more leeway with him to do things after beyond the Pistons, whether he stays with Detroit or not. Now, if he has a good year, I mean, why would you not want to continue in Detroit? There's a lot of young players that you're playing with, and I'm sure that we could pay him a decent amount of money if he wanted to stay in Detroit. So I like it. He's a shooter. We need a shooter. He is in my starting rotation that I have put in for me. So I like Fontecchio, but when we're talking about these guys, man, like you said, there's so many different ways that Bickerstaff can move these lineups. And I'm telling you right now, we'll probably lead the NBA this year in the amount of different starting fives that exist.
Oh, don't say that yet.
It's going to happen at first because but you can't say there's so many different pieces to this puzzle, and we don't know how it's going to fit yet unless they have a great training camp and they figure it out then. But these young guys this core guys still haven't kind of figured it out together. So I think there'll be a lot of moving pieces. Now minutes, I think it'll be consistent. I think everyone will consistently play the same minutes. And I don't think changing the starting lineup is going to be a bad thing. I don't think it's going to, I mean, what are we improving on, Lance? 14 games? Like, there's not a whole lot. I think this is a year to kind of figure out with all these small deals how they want to maneuver and manipulate these guys.
Yeah, I think you're right. We will see a lot of different lineup combinations. We definitely will see different starting lineups, especially early in the season, because I don't know if they'll figure it all out during the training camp period.
It's a
We'll
lot, man.
see. It is. There's a lot to go through, a lot of new names on this team. You did bring up the whole 2-year contract thing, and I think that's setting up Simone Fontecchio really nicely to either sign a bigger contract with the Detroit Pistons when he's 30 years old, as he's kind of like in the middle or exiting his prime at that point. But I think he loves playing with Cade Cunningham. I think there's another deal to be had. But also, it's kind of a good thing by Trajan Langdon to kind of really look out for these players where he's saying, I'm going to sign you for 2 years. You're not getting the contract that, some of these guys saw you were, because I personally thought he'd make like 14 million a year. I thought, especially if Troy Weaver was the GM, I thought like 14 million or more for Simone Fontecchio was what was going to happen in Detroit. 8 million. I thought Malik Beasley was a steal, but 8 million a year for Simone Fontecchio, and he plays both sides of the ball. That is a huge steal for the Detroit. It's a bargain by Trajan Langdon to bring him in. Shout out to Michael Blackstone, the contract genius that Trajan Langdon brought over from New Orleans to try to figure all this stuff out, because there are some cool parts of what the Pistons can do with that salary cap and that room exception. But I like the 2-year deal for Simone Fontecchio. Now, I do believe this means the Detroit Pistons will be out as a third team for any of these trades. I originally wrote down, I don't think the Pistons were going to be the third team in that Sacramento Kings, Chicago Bulls team, that trade, because I know the Bulls were looking for a third team to unload some salary, but San Antonio, they became the third team in that trade. I just don't see the Pistons. I think they have roughly like 20 million in cap space. It could be a little more depending on how they use that money with Simone Fontecchio and Malik Beasley. But I don't think that they'll be a part of any more of these 3-team trades. Now, that doesn't mean they can't bring in another player via a trade. I just don't know if they'll be like looking to take on bad salary as a third team in one of these trades. I don't think that's going to happen anymore. I know I'm going all over the place with this topic of Simone Fontecchio. The point is, I love the trade. I love it for him too, because he can sign a bigger contract at 30 years old. I really think he loves playing with Cade Cunningham, something he talked about at his exit press conference. He talked about playing with Cade and how he was looking forward to the future, and he just loves the city. So there's one final caveat that I want to mention about this contract, and this comes from Yasi Goslin. You should follow him on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. This guy is very good with the cap. But he says the Detroit Pistons can gain an extra $3 million in cap space by renouncing Simone Fontecchio's $5.2 million qualifying offer prior to re-signing him. They can spend their cap space while keeping his cap hold, then go over the salary cap to re-sign him to this amount, and they can end up with 25 to 29 million in remaining cap space, which is just crazy, which means that they could definitely bring in like a Brandon Ingram or someone like that if they wanted to, by taking on a bad contract, which we'll talk about when we're talking about with the starting lineups, because I do want to talk about that here in a little bit and something specifically. But it is really cool. That's why I like Michael Blackstone, being able to, finagle his way around this cap space and all this extra money that they have. That was a great hire by Trajan Langdon. Very underrated move.
Yeah, and I
by
think
him.
it's nice too that we're finally seeing us make deals that are short-term deals instead of signing some guy for 6 years that we don't know what we're going to get out of. Like Blake Griffin, Josh Smith, like the things we used to do. Like I'm very excited to be doing 1 and 2 year deals with these guys to see how well everything pans out for them. Because I mean, you never know. This Malik Beasley could be a bust, but it's not like we spent a lot of money on it to begin with. So I think it's a lot of smart moves that they're making so far. Simone Fontecchio, love it. Malik Beasley, love it. Tim Hardaway Jr., love it. Like it's just, we're very guard heavy now. Like and that's good. I think we still need to soul search a little bit for a rim protector, but that's where saving and a little extra money by bringing on Fontecchio the way we did with his contract gives us a little more power to go maybe and still grab a rim protector at the moment.
Well, I love all the guards that they're bringing in, because this means right now Marcus Sasser's probably the odd man out. I know some fans would hate to hear that, but I'm okay with giving him another year of development time, and also he's a little undersized at 6'1", 6'2", whatever he is. I know he has a biggish wingspan of like 6'7", but he's still undersized. You really got to figure out what you have with Cade and Jaden Ivey, see if those two can work. So I like all the guard help, but also more importantly, it just makes Cade's life easier having this many shooters on the team right now. This is something the Pistons have not had in a while. But how would you rate the offseason by Trajan Langdon so far? Like, what are your thoughts on this? Was this something you expected him to do, or were you kind of like numb to the whole offseason just because of Troy Weaver being here before him?
Oh no, I had high expectations for him to make moves, and he did it. So if we're grading him, I'm giving him a B plus, A minus
Okay.
as
Nice.
of now. Like I mean, he's doing what he told us he's going to do.
Yep.
And blah, blah, blah. Even so, like he was making deals before even having the press conference by getting rid of Troy Weaver, by getting rid of Monty Williams. Like I think that's incredibly important. And I think that he did everything the right way so far. And I don't see that stopping. So I think with all these guys that they're bringing in, and which I was going to mention to you, which we've had the conversation before, that I'm really hoping, since he highlighted Cade in his presser, that we're trying to work with this guy. We're going to do our best to surround this guy with successful players. Like, we're going to do everything. I'm really hoping Cade Cunningham had, like, hey, Malik Beasley's still free agent. Like, I want to play with this guy. Like, I'm hoping there is those kind of talks, and I hope the GM and the players are all like relating to each other enough where they're helping each other out, bringing in some of these guys. Because I think the Malik Beasley thing could have maybe been a part of Cade. Like, hey, dude, like I want some more. Go get me some more, and that's what they did.
Yeah, I really can't complain about the moves he's made. I've loved this offseason since it began. I mean, if he had just ended with like Tobias Harris and Tim Hardaway and re-signed Simone Fontecchio, like if he didn't even bring in Malik Beasley, still it's a great offseason. I would have expected probably a trade at that point. But if it's just left the way it is right now, I do think they still bring in another person because I don't think Bobby Clipman's going to get a lot of minutes. And currently, right now, he's one of the tallest players on your team. You really have no depth at the 5 or the 4 spot behind Jalen Duren and Isaiah Stewart. So you probably need to bring in another big. But if this was just the moves they made this offseason, I'm agreeing with you. B plus, A minus. I really love the moves because again, they're setting Cade up for success. They're putting him in a position to make basketball easier for him in Detroit. I just love these moves. It is not something that I expected though from Trajan Langdon. I did not expect him to hit like this in the offseason when it comes to the draft, when it comes to the trade with Tim Hardaway, when it comes to Malik Beasley and Tobias Harris, and that great contract with Simone Fontecchio. I did not expect that. It caught me off guard, but I'm so far loving it. Like I told you at the beginning of the podcast, I had no idea what we were going to talk about until today. Like I was like really just looking up trade rumors at this point and, things that I don't even think would actually happen, but that's what I was thinking we were going to talk about. And then these signings came and they have been phenomenal, man. They really have been.
Langdon earned me a B plus with getting rid of Troy Weaver and Monty Williams.
Yeah.
That
No, I
was that
agree.
was the start of it. Like, and I think he knew coming into the job. Like, we've had the discussions 100 times. Like, probably sat down with Tom Gores. Like, if I'm going to do this, these two, they're not going to be here anymore. Like, we're going to make this decision. We're going to figure it out. So Trajan has done. He's excelled, and I think it's good. The contract says he's putting together with these guys, and I think it's setting them up for a more successful future than they had in store for them last year.
So do you see them signing? I know we were looking at this at the beginning of the podcast, but like, do you see them bringing in like another center or forward possibly through free agency? I mean, dude, it's kind of like the pool's kind of bare right now.
Yeah, we're not. There's not a lot available. I think Mike Muscala's there for you if he wants to come back to Detroit. I know how much you love him.
I do love him.
But I don't know, man. There's not a whole lot, and that's the only thing that worries me right now is that we did lack rim protection, and it looks like we are committing to Jalen Duren. But dude, I know if I'm an NBA player or just an athlete in general, I'm probably listening to people like you and me, and everyone is ripping this man's defense. Every single one. Everyone's saying that he
Okay,
can't play
yeah.
defense. He can't do this. He can't do that. This is his third year in the league. And
It will be his third year.
maybe he takes a little offense to that because it's not like he's a small player. The dude's built, so maybe he prioritizes a little bit more on the defensive end this year. We don't know. We have no idea. So, but it's really hard because you're right. There's slim pickings for who you want to bring in right now out of free agency, and I don't see anybody really at this point trading any bigs away. So,
Yeah, a couple of things. I want to see Jalen Duren's defense with JB Bickerstaff. I want to see if they can get more effort out of him on that side of the floor because he does just have a ton of talent. If he can be just an average defender at the 5 spot, it changes things for the Detroit Pistons. I mean, he looks like baby Dwight Howard out there, like with his body and his athleticism and the way he just wants to rip the rim down every single time. Now, if we're looking at free agency, there is one name that I'm very interested in. He's a little undersized at the 5 spot, but he can play either the 4 or the 5, and that's Paul Reed, who was recently waived by the Philadelphia 76ers. And as of we're recording, I don't think he's on a team right now. Now, he'll be 25 years old when the season begins. He averaged 7.6 rebounds, 1.3 assists, almost one steal, one block, shot 36.8% from the three-point line on very low volume, but also shot 54% from the field. This is a guy that, again, I really would like the Pistons to take a look at just because he gives you, again, some more lineup flexibility, either at that 4 or the 5. You can play him with Duren. You could play him with Isaiah Stewart if you really wanted to. He can be an insurance policy in case either of those guys go down with injuries, because both of them have struggled with injuries early in their career, whether it's Duren's ankles or Isaiah Stewart's shoulder. They have dealt with injuries early on in their career. And if you're dealing with them early on, you're probably going to continue to deal with them. Unfortunately, that's just the game of professional athletes. You are going to deal with injuries, so you need to have some type of insurance policy, and I think that's what Paul Reed gives you. Again, a little undersized, but he had 24 starts with the Philadelphia 76ers last year, and he played pretty good in place for Joel Embiid. Like, I really like Paul Reed, and that's a name that I think you could get. If you're not going to make any trades for any big name players, I would like them to bring in a Paul Reed, because then again, it allows you to play Simone Fontecchio at the 3 or the 4. It allows you to maybe bring Ron Holland along slowly, because right now, if we're looking at the roster, there's 12 guys under contract. Ron Holland might be playing some minutes for the Detroit Pistons, and I would much rather see them bring him along slower during the season than just throwing him to the fire right away. But outside of Paul Reed, I'm really not interested in too many of the other bigs in free agency right now.
We could bring in Giannis's brother. He could probably fit a good role at 5. You think?
No, Thanasis, no.
Yeah,
Dude, I'd rather.
dude, he wants to get traded. Why not bring him? Because then maybe we could land Giannis. It could be a package deal if we get his brother and like hold him hostage in Detroit. Be like, hey, you got to come here and play with your brother. I don't know, dude. There's nothing available. Like Paul Reed, you're right. It's the only one that you look at this list. Other than, I mean, you look at it and yeah, there's nothing here.
I mean, there's JaVale McGee, but he's 16 years in the league. He might be a good insurance policy.
But we do need to grab somebody, because you're right. We don't have anything. I think we're looking at a lot of small ball in Detroit this year, and I'm not against it, but I still want to like Jalen Duren. Like, I want him to be successful. I want him to be good, because I really do like watching him play. So I'm hoping that he can maybe fall into something here, because what JB Bickerstaff, who'd he coach? It wasn't Claxton and Mobley, was it? Was that?
No, it was Jared Allen and
Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, and he turned those guys into. I mean, they weren't super defensive powerhouses, or not Mobley, but he turned them into a very good, successful big. So we don't know. Maybe Bickerstaff has something in play that puts Jalen Duren in better positions to be a better defending center.
Another name. Yeah, I mean, he did. I mean, Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, they did kind of come in with some defensive chops more than Jalen Duren did. Like Evan Mobley, I think there was some considering him like, maybe like I know he was a defensive player of the year candidate. I think like in his second year or something like that.
Yeah,
it was unreal. And Jared Allen, he definitely can protect the rim. But another free agent's big that I'm looking at, Bismack Biyombo. He's 31 years old currently. I think he'll be 32 as the season starts. Just a defensive-minded guy. Just that insurance policy. He's not going to get big minutes with the Pistons, but if one of these guys goes down, you have a big. That's a veteran that knows how to play the NBA game. That's Bismack Biyombo. It has a little juice left in the tank where he could probably give you a big game here and there. I like Bismack Biyombo. It's so funny that you bring up Giannis's name, because there's this, and for good reason, there are some Pistons fans that think Malik Beasley will not shoot over 40% again in Detroit because he's not playing with a Giannis and Damian Lillard that, takes so much attention on offense, like from the defense, that they're creating a lot of open looks for him. I'm just going to ask you, because you're a betting man, over under that Malik Beasley shoots 40% or better in Detroit. Would you take the over or the under on that?
Take the under, because I think his attempts are going to be a lot higher.
Okay.
I think he's going to shoot more, because we already talked about he doesn't get to the rim. Like, and he maybe he has that potential of getting to the rim, because when you play with Milwaukee, they're not asking you to put the ball on the floor like that. They're asking you to spot up and catch and shoot. So maybe we could see a little bit more out of Malik Beasley coming to Detroit because maybe his game style is going to change a little bit because he's not catered to Giannis having four people guard him in the paint while he travels his whole way to dunk the basketball. So I'm not sure. But I would take his under just because I think his attempts are going to be more.
He did shoot 39. What is this? 39.9% on 8.7 attempts in 37 games in Minnesota. With averaging 19.6 per game. Now, he only played 37 games, and he came back down to earth the following season, averaging 12 points per game, but he only started 18 for them. Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to go ahead and say I'm going to be positive. I'm just going to say he shoots over 40% in Detroit. I'm just saying 41% sticks in Detroit. But let's have some fun with these starting lineups. Based on the players we have right now, we currently have 12 players under contract. That's Cade, Malik Beasley, Asar, Tobias Harris, Jalen Duren, Ivy, Tim Hardaway, Ron Holland, Simone Fontecchio, Isaiah Stewart, Marcus Sasser, and Bobby Klintman. Those are the 12 that are under contract for the Detroit Pistons right now. But I'm going to turn it over to you. What is your starting lineup for the Detroit Pistons based on the 12 players they have on the team right now?
So I want to go 1-1 with you. So
Okay.
we'll go down 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 positions. So at 1, we're both going to agree. Is Cade Cunningham.
Yeah, Cade Cunningham.
Okay, so at 2, I have Tim Hardaway Jr.
I have Malik Beasley.
Okay. 3, I have Fontecchio.
3, I went with Asar Thompson.
Okay. 4, I have Tobias Harris.
4, I have Tobias Harris.
And 5, I have Jalen Duren.
I have Jalen Duren. Yep.
Okay, so it's not that off. It's not that bad.
No.
I don't know. I like to support Cade with the shooting in the starting lineup. That's how I look at it. I like Fontecchio and I like Tim Hardaway Jr. But as we already said, that these guys can be interchangeable at any point. That we could have these. My lineup could start one game and Beasley ended up gets more minutes than Tim Hardaway Jr. off the bench. So I don't. That's the best part about bringing in all these guys that have somewhat similar play styles is that we can run with hot hands. We don't have to rely on somebody hoping they catch fire at some point. So I mean, I like Asar Thompson coming off the bench. I think Ron Holland maybe sneaks his way into the starting lineup at some point. I think he plays well enough that he might be able to go and replace like Fontecchio. But I think you have to consistently have 2 shooters surrounded by Cade when he's in the game.
Oh, I think you're right. And I mean, I went with Asar just because I want to be a little bit more creative and I want to start the game with a ton of energy and a little bit of defense on the floor. Like, I don't love Jalen Duren and Asar Thompson because they're both non-floor spacers currently as they play. We don't know if Asar Thompson just starts draining threes or banging threes this season. You know, maybe he does. But right now, the way that they played their last season, it's hard to play them both on the floor. But with Malik Beasley, Cade Cunningham taking a step, I think he shot 35% from 3, and then Tobias Harris. I feel like that's enough shooting for these two to operate. But I like Asar Thompson, and with this much space on the floor already, aside from Jalen Duren, you can do some creative things with him, whether it's, you know, him attacking the hoop, whether it's him cutting to the basket. You're just not going to be able to hide him in the corner anymore on the 3-point line. You're going to be able to do some cool things with him. That's why I want to see him. But I'm for Simone Fontecchio starting. The reason I'm bringing Simone Fontecchio, one, because they don't have much depth at the 4. And I don't think they're going to be playing Bobby Klintman to start the season at the 4 spot. I think he's a little bit of a project that we'll probably see him get some minutes at some point this season. But I don't want him to be thrown to the fire right away. And I'm bringing Simone Fontecchio because I don't want Ron Holland to be, because I haven't seen him play yet in the summer league. That will be in a few days from now. So I don't want to see Ron Holland thrown to the fire just yet. Now, my opinion might change after summer league, just like it did when Asar Thompson went off. So I'm trying to bring Ron Holland along slowly. That's why I'm starting Asar Thompson, and Simone Fontecchio gives me the versatility to play the 3 or the 4. with him coming off the bench and kind of, again, bringing Ron Holland along slowly. And then Jaden Ivey and Tim Hardaway Jr., I think that's a lethal combination of like athleticism and speed and just raw ability with Jaden Ivey than someone that plays a little bit more under control and can take pressure off of Jaden Ivey as a ball handler and a guy that can, run the offense a little bit with Tim Hardaway Jr. So that's why I have those two coming off the bench as well. That would be my starting lineup and basically my 10-man rotation.
So the reason I have where I have everybody in their positions just because their counterparts are so great with each other. Like I think Beef Stew, as much as I really don't want him on this team, I think he thrives more as a starting five. Or not a backup five, and not putting him at a 4 position with Jalen Duren. I think it was just a horrible combination to have two of those pieces, and not that they were bad as Stewart was a bad defender, but having two guys that should basically be typical 5-man on your team. I think him in the second unit with Asar Thompson, I think it just works out really well. Because where Isaiah Stewart could lack in rebounding, that's where you get Asar's slashing ability, and then you get Beef Stew spreading the floor because he wants to shoot threes. Like that's where he wants to be on offense, and that gives Jaden Ivey the opportunity to be, and Ron Holland, the opportunity to be able to pass to a guy that floor spaces. So, but at the end of the day, too, like the coaching side of me, even though I'm never going to coach a day in my life in the NBA, I think the starting five could be also adjusted depending on who we're playing. Like if we're playing someone that it's a LeBron James at the 3 or whatever, I don't want Fontecchio in. I'm going to start Asar Thompson at the 3. Like I think it really depends on matchups, and I think we're going to see that's one thing we lacked last year is we didn't get Monty didn't give a shit about the matchups. He's like, nope, Killian's playing. I don't care who he's on. That's not how we're doing this. Like you want if you go way back is like. Probably one of my favorite things to watch is back when it was the Miami Heat versus San Antonio Spurs in the NBA Finals. Every single time LeBron came back into the game, Kawhi Leonard checked in.
Yep.
And that's how that's Greg Popovich. That's one of the best coaches in the game. That's how you do this. Like you want certain guys to be guarding certain players. Like even Ron Holland can fit that status quo with coming in and guarding a premier star forward. Like it can happen. Like because you can see Ron Holland guarding Jason Tatum. I could see Ron Holland guarding Giannis. Like I can see this happening. So I could with his size, I think he lacks, but I think with his speed, you understand where I'm at. It's just I think it's all based off of who we're playing and like how many minutes that these guys are getting. So I think it's all adjustable. And I think the only thing we lack is another 5. If we get another big man in for rotation, I think it'll be a lot better because if this is what we have going forward, Stu and Duren won't be on the floor at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I think you might see them play a few minutes together, but if they're the only two bigs, most likely you're not going to see them share the floor together.
Tobias Harris helps us so much, man.
He does.
Tobias gives us a 4 that we can trust now, and we don't have to question. We don't have to throw Fontecchio into this position where he has to play a 4 when we want him at a 3. He can play the 4 position, but I'd rather have Tobias Harris there than Fontecchio because he gives us more.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get where you're coming from. And when I look at the bench unit and I see potentially Jaden Ivey, Tim Hardaway Jr., Ron Holland, Asar Thompson, and Isaiah Stewart, you get 4 guys that just give you maximum effort in Isaiah Stewart, in Ron Holland, in Asar Thompson, in Jaden Ivey every single night. That would just be such a nightmare for an opposing team. Again, probably not the most skilled second unit in the league, but when you're talking about like just playing with their motor revved all the way up, foot on the gas, you know what I'm saying? Just going to try to get every loose ball, diving on the floor, pushing the tempo. That's what you're going to get with that second unit. But
you can't show me a second unit faster than Jaden Ivey, Ron Holland, and Asar Thompson.
Oh, it's
you can't show me. You can't. And if you bring these guys in, and whether they're facing the other team's starting 5 that could be somewhat gassed, and bringing these guys like, hey, we're going to run 24/7. We're running up and down the floor, and then with my lineup, you have a Malik Beasley and Isaiah Stewart that can spread the floor as well. Like I just hope Jaden Ivey keeps his mindset that he wants to win games. He does. I hope he is legit when he says, I don't care if I'm coming off the bench. I don't care if I'm starting. I want to play. I want to win games. I hope he is serious about that mentality, because if that's the case, he can put up a lot of numbers in the second unit.
He can. I also like this idea too. Like if you start, I know we're going back and forth. We're just sharing our opinions, but like I like the idea of starting Asar Thompson and having him get after people defensively, and then potentially just like, all right, man, Asar Thompson went to the bench. Ah, fuck, Ron
Ron
Holland's coming
Hollins.
in. Yeah, now I gotta go
Yeah.
against this guy. Holy crap! Like
Yeah.
that's just a lot of fun for me too.
Yeah.
Like when I think about these two different lineups. Ah, man, it's gonna be
It's
a
just
fun
nice
year.
to see a roster that it has potential. Not saying
Yes.
we're gonna win. We're gonna win over 22 games. Like, not saying it's gonna be that successful, but at least we're having a building block of guys that want to play. And I think Trajan Langdon's gonna get that out of them. Every
Oh,
single one of them. I think this is the year you see a bunch of players on a team saying, "Thank God you took away the guy that we all hated, and let's do this the right way now." Like, that's where we're going to be at. And I'm very excited to see it.
I think there is an eagerness with these players too to like show the NBA world. Like, dude, we're so much better than 14 wins. We were just being coached by a guy that just did not get the best out of us. And we're getting a guy with JB Bickerstaff. Real quick before we move on to the final topic, JB Bickerstaff has added Sidney Lowe to his coaching staff. That actually happened a couple hours before we started recording. I just wanted to throw that in there. So we do have one trade we're going to talk about. And dude, if you had asked me if we did this podcast like 2 days ago before all these signings, I'd be a little bit more into it. I'm just going to throw that out there. But Sports Illustrated All Hawks Fan Nation writer Jackson Caudell put together a little trade. And in his trade, the Atlanta Hawks trade DeAndre Hunter to the Detroit Pistons for Jaden Ivey and a 2028 second round pick via the New York Knicks. You actually sent me this trade. And like I said, if you had showed me this 2 days ago, I'd be a little bit more on board with it. I'm not a fan of this trade because I don't see how the minutes would be split at the 3 and the 4 with DeAndre Hunter,
Yeah.
Simone Fontecchio, Tobias
Yep.
Harris, Asar Thompson, and potentially Ron Holland. It's just
Yeah.
too many
Yeah.
3 and 4s thrown in. Even though we're talking about we need more big man help, I just don't know if he's the guy right there. Now, if the Pistons didn't sign Tobias Harris or re-sign Simone Fontecchio, I would actually welcome this trade. I'd be fine with it. I think Jaden Ivey and DeAndre Hunter are pretty similar players. I know that Jaden Ivey's a little younger than DeAndre Hunter, and there's a little bit more of that growth he could potentially still have in the NBA. But right now, I think they're pretty similar players. The only negative about DeAndre Hunter, I guess it's two, is injury concerns, and there's just been inconsistency throughout his career. I mean, he is a talented player. He just doesn't put it together every single night. But what are your thoughts on the trade by Jackson Caudell?
You crushed it. If we're not in the position that we're at right now, then I say do it, because we could use a guy, but we already brought everybody in for DeAndre Hunter's position.
Yeah.
We have it filled. And as much as I'm going to kick myself for this, I love this roster right now. I really do. I really have no problem with it. If Bobby Klintman figures it out, gains a little bit of weight, and shows us that he is what he was in Australian League, correct? Is that
Yeah,
right?
the NBL, the NBL.
Yeah, yeah. So I think if he can maybe put it together and I think he could get some minutes. I mean, I think he's going to start in a G League, and we're going to see what he can do, which we are going to go watch him play. I do plan on doing
we
that.
have to.
We are going to go, and maybe we could maybe we can be mic'd up for it. Like, I would love to go and do something like that and go watch him play. But I think this roster's good. I think Atlanta needs Jaden Ivey more than we need DeAndre Hunter, and we're giving up more for it. So I trust that Trajan's not going to fall for some type of trap like this. I think if Ivy's still here, if Duran's still here, Asar's still here, we are committing to these guys. They would have already been gone. They would have been gone maybe before the draft. Like, there would have been talks to get these guys out. I think from his presser to this day, he is committed to what he wants to do with the young players, and everyone that's a Pistons fan should be excited about it.
Yeah, I think if Trajan Langdon, I think if they had a little bit more than 14 wins, we might have seen some of these trades, maybe we would have seen a young player go. But since the team was so bad last year, I think it's almost impossible to evaluate them from his perspective. I think as fans, we kind of have an idea of where they're going to go, even though, I mean, obviously, we're not in a position to make moves like Trajan Langdon. Let me throw that in there. But, we've watched all 82 games. We kind of get an idea. And, like, that's why we have the opinions that we have. Whether we're right or whether we're wrong, only time will tell. But from Trajan Langdon's perspective, I think it's wise to go at least one more year with the young guys on this team and just say, okay, with a better head coach, with better players around them, I can truly evaluate these guys and figure out what my next steps are going to be. I mean, I'm not ruling out a trade for any of these young guys, like, possibly moving on from them. I just don't think it will happen this offseason. Now, I was very, very like high on that potentially happening before the offseason started. I definitely thought Jaden Ivey or Jalen Duren would be on the move, whether it was at the draft or somewhere during like, this period of time, free agency period. I thought that was going to happen, but that's when I thought Troy Weaver was going to still remain the GM. And I think, if he had been, maybe we would have already seen it. But with Trajan Langdon coming in with fresh eyes, making the moves he has, we're getting a real season to evaluate these guys. And yeah, I'm really excited to see what these young guys can do. And hopefully they prove me all wrong. That's what I'm hoping for.
The biggest thing from his presser that I took, and I didn't like it, but you have to accept it, is that they asked him about where are we going to be in the future. And he said playoffs are not even on my mind for the next year or so. And he's being serious about that. It's going to take time. It's going to, Rome wasn't built in a day. But as a Pistons fan, I think you need to be real excited about where we're headed, because I mean, maybe it might not be, maybe we don't make the play in this year or next year. But if we can progressively win more games, I think that's all that really matters. I mean, we're in the Eastern Conference. If we start building a better team, we have more of an opportunity, I think, to be successful. But it's got to start somewhere. And Trajan has set a foundation. He's set a plan, and he's following suit. So that's all we can be happy about at the moment.
No, for sure, for sure. And when we go to the G League game, when we go to Grand Rapids to watch Bobby Clemon play against the Grand Rapids Gold, because that's going to be really great. We're going to have to we got to go to a local Grand Rapids spot for food. I forget what restaurant you were telling me, and I think it was like a local chain. I was like, dude, who the hell does this guy think he is telling me about Olive Garden after a G League
game?
Man.
Dude, their breadsticks are fire, man.
They are good. They are good, but I'm not going to Olive Garden.
This is not an Olive Garden promotion stream?
No, not at all. But anyways, thank you guys for listening to the 3 Championship Drive podcast. Do us a favor, go to Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts and hit the follow button. After you hit the follow button, rate with 5 stars and tell us what lineup you would like to go with between me and Zach's. But more importantly, tell a Pistons fan